It's so great to see you all. This is the beginning of the reunion retreat up at Mount Madonna Center in the Santa Cruz Mountains of California. And this is a really special session. Let's do that over because we had a really loud airplane. So why don't you, or you just keep it running and we'll just edit. It's all good practice. Just let that plane go over.
Practicing for life.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to see you all on a beautiful day here at Mount Madonna Center. So this is the opening session of the reunion retreat. And we inaugurated and started this retreat after the passing of Baba Haridas. And so it's a retreat that's near and dear to many of our hearts. And it has a dual theme. It's both reunion, so bringing together friends and family who may have been coming for many years. But then there's the second meaning of reunion, which each of us returning to Source and connecting to Source. So that's an experience that we're all sharing together. So this is a really special session, certainly for me, and I think for many others. The theme is work as play. And so we're honoring the life and karma yoga of Baba Haridas. And through this session, we'll be able to hear from some of our elders and founders an overview of Babaji's life, his practice of karma yoga, and we'll talk about some of the projects here on the mountain, and then we'll give an update on the process and the physical manifestation of a memorial shrine that we've begun to design and plan to honor Babaji. So it should be a fun afternoon, and so we'll just get rolling with it. So I'm really happy to introduce two of our founders, Sharda and Dayanand Diffenbaugh, who I've asked to give an overview and introduction to our teacher, Baba Haridas, and in particular some of these themes of play and work and how they might become one and the practice of that, which we'll be exploring throughout the retreat.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohan, and it's wonderful to be all together and to be here at the temple and to be oriented toward a shrine for Babaji, Baba Haridas. Many of us here today worked alongside him, studied under him, learned, and he gave and taught constantly. So you only had to be near him to be learning, as well as his compassionate continence and love was palpable for all of us. So there aren't words I can say about how he affected me personally and how positive his life was for so many. But we can share stories that illustrate a little of who he was and how he was. And in addition to Dayanand and I, there's several other founders or people who grew up with Babaji who will speak as well, I hope. Mohan asked that we share about Babaji's early aim and pursuit of peace. And for that, you may wish to read Path Unfolds, which was Babaji's autobiography that he wrote when he was in the United States. He wrote it about his life until he arrived in the United States. So it really reveals his aims for peace. So I do suggest you read that. But he told the story of how as a little boy, from his early childhood, his quest for being unified with the divine and realizing his self, his true self, consumed him. And he followed that quest in the traditional ways of his country and culture at the time. And he also transcended all of those traditional ways and practices and constantly looked for the truth in every situation. So he is of the Vairagi Vaishnava sect, and he completed all of the vows of a renunciate of that sect. And it's a path of qualified non-dualism where you recognize that there is a supreme reality that's unified, one non-dual reality. And you also recognize that the qualities of creation are real to us, as real as that non-dual reality that's formless and that we can't actually hold on to because it's formless. But it permeates all, and then from it emerges all these real forms, and they become the path to it. So that is how he taught. And he mostly taught through his example, his discipline, his devotion, his work, his study, his love. Wonderful, wonderful teacher. So we're all very fortunate. Someone asked me this morning, well, now that he's passed, what is it like here? And I said, he's here. He poured his life into here and into his children in India and to his center in Canada and into all the books that he wrote. So it's different. He's joined the formless, but it's permeating Mount Madonna. So that's what I'll say about his early life of searching for peace. And I don't know, Dainon, the next works in India. Do you want to speak about that? Or coming to the West, or building communities of peace? What's your choice?
Thank you. And there's so many here. I hope we'll share stories and perspectives on Babaji. I'm inclined to share another side of Babaji, that he was a fighter. He was a martial artist of great skill and beauty. To see him dance with two swords or the staves whirling was a thing of inspiration. He was so graceful. And when the Chinese were going to invade northern India, he organized a local group to fight. So he was a freedom fighter and part of the freedom struggle in India as well. And so I experienced that energy from him, working with him. And I agree with the peace and compassion part, which I also felt and was inspired by. But he was a relentless worker. Somebody just reminded us of one of his sayings, that rest is rust. You know, he just kicked us in the butt the whole time. And that was one of his sayings. Just as people saying, it's so hard to do sadhana, Babaji, he would say, just kick yourself. He was strict that way, and he in meditation class would walk around with a stick, a bamboo kind of thing, and hit us if we moved, until people complained, and then he stopped doing it and just started clicking the stick, and then he even stopped that after, because he realized we weren't going to do it. We couldn't do it. He taught us everything that we could take, but he had more to teach us, but we weren't ready. But I asked him about that toward the end, because there was some specific things I was really hoping he would pass on to us. And then I said, okay, well, Babaji, if you don't teach us, what's going to happen? He said, when the time comes, you will know. So these teachings are timeless teachings. They were revealed to the sages of old. They're in the creation themselves. They never go away. They're never truly lost. They're here for us to find them. And that's what this place is all about, finding ourselves, finding the teachings that help to reveal self in ourselves and with each other. This is Mount Madonna's story. when we were conceiving this place and going to the county and presenting our case for a rezoning and the use permit for an organized camp, we went to Babaji and asked, Babaji, what's this about? And he wrote, it is a place where people will find hidden talents. That was a mystifying statement to us at the time. So we asked him to clarify. He said, someone is a cook, someone is a builder, someone is a teacher. Some people know and some people don't know. The place will be a place where people who have knowledge of their talents will develop their talents. And people who don't know what their talents are will find their talents. So we came to understand that it was about self-development. And then we asked him, well, Babaji, we came to you to learn yoga. What's yoga got to do with it? And he wrote, yoga removes the obstacles. So that's the formula for Mount Madonna Center right there. Removing the obstacles through yoga and finding our dharma. The dharma is what we are. Each one of us has gifts. The sun is pouring out heat and light. It's not asking for permission. It's not deciding whether it's going to do it or not. That's what the sun is. When we find that mission in our lives of who we are, and we give that freely, then we're both expressing our creative potential and completing the whole, because it's being given into the whole. And this is the principle of Karma Yoga, giving into the whole and completing the whole. And this was his life. All these rock walls, this was a grass and dirt hill right here. It had the grinding rocks here. That was all that was here. A couple trees, He stood here and he went like this. And that's where we started the yajna. It's just dirt here. There's a little horse corral over here. There was a lot of flies around while we did the yajnas in the early days. It was informal, and yet he started that yajna, which is also the symbolic way of sacrifice, to get us into the Vedic tradition and to bring to us that spirit of giving, of offering. And then the yajna, you offer into the fire the seeds, which represent the potentiality of action. And so we're offering up all our actions to the fire, which is symbol of consciousness, which devours, burns up all the seeds and takes the prayers up to everywhere. So this is the principle that we studied. Now, I would say one other thing about the retreat and the idea of work as play. I don't experience it that way. I experience work as freedom. And I also experience a play as freedom. And that freedom has to do with peace. And that freedom has to do with not worrying about how this is going to affect me, or how tired I'm going to be at the end of working all day on the rock crew. It's just giving. And I know Sudhir, Vishwanath, JD, other people here, Ron, and Ram Sharan. And so a lot of you had this experience of just burning ourselves on the rock crew with Babaji, and it didn't matter. And we were dead at the end of the day, but we were happy. There came a time in the work where you just were in the work and the flow was going, and that was everything. That we were free at that moment, And I think you've all experienced that when you've been in your discipline, in concentration, and just giving. And the parents know that from giving to their children, and this is part of the law of creation. So these are the principles we are working with, and there's so many stories, but I'll stop talking for a few minutes. Thank you.
So I know that, do we have time for others?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So maybe Rajendra, if the camera can turn, and Sudhir and Umesh, Bhavani.
Were you guys...
Yeah, come sit.
You want to stay there, you can sit there.
But can you come?
Yeah.
And Imesh, will you please? Yeah, thank you. And Sudhir, will you please
Yeah.
tell the story?
There we go. Okay, make sure I land first. Yeah, okay.
All right, good.
And this is the microphone, I
That's
assume?
the microphone.
Okay. Boom. Let's see. I guess I've decided to focus on a little part of play. It's kind of a sad part of play. It was during the final 5 years of Babaji's life. Sharda was Babaji's medical power of attorney, and I was his legal power of attorney during that time. And one of the roles that we took, in addition to trying to staff everything and make sure that Babaji was covered for all of his care, after he had had a series of serious strokes, he really didn't have mobility at that point. But he continued to stay in and have visitors from his devotees, and he continued to play, which was part of his therapy. And he played at levels that were suitable for where he had come to physically. One of the things in the earlier stages, when he still had good mobility of his hands and what have you, was Miss Piggy. And actually, Miss Piggy was one of my favorites. Miss Piggy was a little puppet that when you squeezed would spit out a pellet. And so we marked out a whole course in the family room at Robles where Babaji lived. And Babaji became very competitive. One of the things in Babaji in play is he wasn't just lackadaisical about the outcome. He cared. And so he would challenge. I mean, you know, he would, when somebody came to visit him, it was like, okay, we're on, see what you can do with the targets versus what I can do. And the amazing thing is Babaji was really good at it. Over time, we went to other games, other therapies. Balloon was the big one, probably. Badminton was part of the scene. But I think I'll always remember the Miss Piggy because it was so it encapsulated who Babaji was. Very playful, fun, but it was focused and it had had a purpose. It wasn't just random. So okay.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking to that.
I'm not really sure where to begin. I know it will move, but I met Babaji probably early mid-70s, 73, 74. And it took me a long time to develop a relationship with him. And then as that relationship grew, it took me a longer time to develop a role in the relationship. I didn't see, and we have that saying, work honestly, meditate every day, meet people without fear and play. It really does personify who Babaji was in terms of his relationship to Westerners, I think. But there was a Westerner who met Babaji before he came here, a guy named Prem Das, and Rajendra and I are developing an oral history program. And so we found Prem Das. He was working at Orchards. We invited him up. He came up several times. We interviewed him. We filmed him. He brought up some photographs from those years and letters. And in one of the letters, I think Prem Das, I'm not sure if Prem Das was still in India because he went to India to meet him, or Babaji was in India, but one of the letters he said, Babaji wrote to him, has anybody attained DS? And Prem Das showed us that and said, what is it? Samadhi, which one? I never know these things.
Did you say D, the letter D? Dharma Samadhi?
I don't think it was that high up, but it was a samadhi. In those days, Babaji was very purely a yogi. Premdas said he would go in his room and it would be glowing. He taught Babaji asanas, and he said that's all he taught him. He didn't teach him pranayama or anything else. So Babaji focused, focused, focused. I think when he came here, he had to develop of sharing his yoga with the Westerners, and it became much more tolerant of who we were. I want to say the idiots we were, but that's a pejorative. But he did become much more tolerant of us and work honestly, meditate daily, meet people without fear and play. That was the glove that fit over his hand, in my opinion. So the play is important. One, one thing for me was we worked hard. As Diane put out, you who have not been there wouldn't know what it was like to be under that master's thumb directing us. At the end of the day, he went in and had dinner. The rock crew kind of stumbled behind him. As soon as he was through with dinner, he got up and he ran down to the volleyball courts, and all of the kids followed him, and a number of the adults. And he set up volleyball. And during that time, the younger people and those of us who are a little older, certainly Jai was one of them, wanted to play just as adults, I think. I mean, I'm projecting that on Jai, but, and Babaji said, no, the kids have to play. And I'm talking about this size kids, Gaurav. Were you one of those where, I know Rio was, and Satish, and Umesh, who tried to escape, as I recall. But it was like, train these kids. Later on, those kids became league champions. It was a small school, but he saw that we had to include them in the education and in play. So that he came here on Saturdays about 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock maybe. Class started at 7:30. And he left here in the summers at 9 o'clock at night when it got dark. He just stayed and played at the end. And then the next day he went to what we had as satsang. He was an amazing human being. I cannot say that enough. No matter what stories you hear from us, they will all be on the foundation of he was amazing. So that's kind of the play. He was a jokester. He did that. But when he was working, it was work. When it was meditating in class, if somebody didn't respect the sadhana, he would go up, tell them to leave. Besides the stick, he took it really seriously. His room, the main room where he ate, everybody could come in. It wasn't closed to anybody, whether they knew him or not. He had private appointments, and those were private, but the rest of the time he'd be there eating his lunch, and people would come in. He met people without fear. He met some really strange people, some people who turned out to be criminals. He met a lot of wonderful people, people who were experiencing great sadness and pain. He was there for everybody. And then there's the play. So the play is a part, but he
Hi, everybody. I think one of my favorite stories. I think I need to tell you this one too, because so we're all Well, actually, it was a Saturday. Everybody was up in the CB, and um, I wasn't there this Saturday, or I was up at the center, but I wasn't in the CB, and it was Darshan in the middle of the day. I think I'm not sure why there was no rock crew or anything, but somebody asked Babaji like a pure mind was, and he said being able to tell that someone is in the garden stealing flowers. Okay, and everybody there probably didn't know what the heck he was talking about. But later that day, when I come around and I'm asking, I think I was asking someone else, like, what was going on, what happened with Darshan and all that, and they told me, and I was like, that was me. That was me stealing flowers in the garden because at the time I didn't live up here, so I actually felt like I was stealing the flowers up here. But nobody else probably knew what the heck he was talking about. But it was that was that was pretty fun. It was confession time. Um, so I grew up with Babaji, you know, you know, from the womb, basically, yeah, and and nothing less than a magical experience from the very beginning, for sure, and so playful. The man was so playful, and as you were saying, I was always probably trying to escape from, doing this or that or whatever. But he was always so inclusive. He would seek out individuals and see that they were slightly differently tuned or whatever, and then he would be able to tell, just like all the different kind of sicknesses, everybody needs a different medicine. Everybody in this room had a different medicine, from him. So that is one of the most phenomenal things about him, was his ability to see and recognize everybody's different sickness that they had. And that is like, nobody can do that. I mean, literally, I mean, who else have you ever seen in your life that could do that? So, and he definitely pushed, I mean, he definitely would also push. I mean, he pushed my boundaries, like getting me to do some silly stuff, dressing up like women and putting on these ridiculous outfits and all this stuff. And it's like, are you ready to burn? Go jump in the fire and see if you can handle this. And it was like, oh, wow, okay. If I could give back in my lifetime, just the smallest fraction of what I've been given in this lifetime, I'll be forever grateful. So that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Thanks, you all.
Yeah, Mohan, you gonna share some stories?
I do have a story provoked by Sudhir, but as we're doing a transition, and do we maybe have two more volunteers that? Oh, great. Yeah, come up and join. I'll just pick up on the volleyball theme. As being one of those kids that joined the school of volleyball. So like Sudhir said, after a full day of work, where the adults, we weren't yet adults at that time, were putting in that kind of work, and we're at dinner and we're just looking at the clock like we can't wait. It's like 5:30, and okay, it's 5:40. Like, is everybody done? Like, it's almost time to go down, right? And then Babaji would write or whistle volleyball, and the kids were out the door, just racing down to the volleyball courts, like just the absolute highlight of our week. And it really was the smallest children, seemingly as soon as they could walk, all the way up to our eldest elders. And I'm thinking of Vishnu Ma out on the volleyball court. I mean, she was probably in her mid-70s, and yet a solid volleyball player. Like you speaking to the hidden talents, like it turned out many people had this talent for volleyball because it was just such a rich part of the culture. And that's how it started, on sandy dirt courts down by the lower gym area. And then step by step, stone by stone or tile by tile, or in this case, load of sand by sand, the courts and the facilities took a step up and our play took a step up. And I think indicative of Babaji's discipline and drive, volleyball was no different in terms of this temple starting out as a dirt mound and now it's this beautiful temple. That's how volleyball was too. And so for Hanuman Olympics, and you'll see down at the community building a bunch of the historical Hanuman Olympic shirts that were brought up. We went from that community style volleyball to having top players from Stanford come to play on our teams. And then we started going to the Junior Olympics, and it just kept going and going and going until some of the kids went to play in college. And the pinnacle really was our girls' teams, who 2 times, this little school on the mountain, have been state champions. And that was a real joy, not only to see that level of competition over in San Jose, but Babaji was sure to be at those matches and cheering as hard as anyone, especially when Soma Sharan was on that team and some of those girls. So just as the work, was truly serious work, the play was serious play.
I was a teacher of many of these kids. So the ones that have children of their own, I taught them when they were 3 to 6 years old. And once I said something to Babaji about how much he gave to them and how much they gave back, and he said, I held them on my lap. Like they grew up playing on my lap. What to say about Babaji? When Sharda said there aren't words, that's the main feeling that I have. I never did rock wall work, but I did Ramayana work with Babaji, and he was just as intense then. I can remember him standing with a glue gun like 3 days before the performance, like it was a weapon, and just so intense, like so much work, so little time, running around with this glue gun. And then at the end of the day, though, when Hamsa or me or Kranti would bring in the teacups to the kitchen, he'd be sitting and going through his mail, which he got a lot of mail, and he answered all the letters. And that was 4 days a week with us, so he answered hundreds of letters every week. He showed me once a box of 1 week's mail underneath his bed. It was huge. So Babaji's capacity was amazing. And whatever he did, whether it was playing or being compassionate to someone suffering or working, or especially in some of those traditional things like sadhana, meditation, ritual, then if anybody, as has been mentioned, if anybody tried to deviate, he was just as fierce about that. But I think I want to speak to Babaji's organic quality. Just like he said here from the first day that we walked the land with him, that this would be the place if we ever had a temple, this would be the place. And I remember a child asked him, soon after Hanumanji was installed, and that's a very organic story, how that happened. How did you plan that? And he shook his head. He didn't plan it. He said, for 20 years,
people have been offering and praying and meditating at that spot. And now that love has taken the form of the temple. That was his answer. He also said that this was a place where people could come and be cured by love. And when we asked how that would happen, he said, your own practice, your own sadhana is the way that the love will be created. And then anyone can come and will feel it. And this statement that's been mentioned a couple of times, for about 2 years, I lived in Leonard Street House, which was before we bought this property, and it was a house that Ma Reinu owned in downtown Santa Cruz. Ma was his caretaker and sponsor to be here. We owe a great debt of gratitude to Ma, because if she hadn't given him that place and taken care of him and given him a place to live, I don't know that any of this could have ever happened as well. But I did appointments, because even before we bought the land on Tuesdays, Babaji gave personal appointments. And I was a college student, and I didn't happen to have classes on Tuesday. And Gautam, who was living at the house at the time and was sort of the papa of the house, we called it Leonard Street Finishing School for Girls, because Ma and Babaji would have to tell us, like, offer a chair to the elders, turn out the lights, And I was the oldest at 19 of the girls. And so I ran these appointments. I scheduled them and, and at tea time, it was, I would bring a cup of tea in to Babaji, a snack and tea, and whoever was having the 3 o'clock appointment would have a cup of tea and a snack too. So I came and I put the teacups down one day, and on Babaji's board was written this little list. He liked to make lists. 1, 2, 3, 4. Numbered. 1, work honestly. 2, meditate every day. 3, meet people without fear. 4, play. Now this was obviously an answer to I can't remember who it was in the appointment, but it was an answer that he was giving to something that this person had asked him or was consulting him about. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to say these 4 things as the prescription to lead a yogic life. It was just the moment, that moment. But when I saw it, I went back out to the kitchen where I would sit during the appointments, and I thought, that's good. And I wrote it down, and I stuck it up on a little bulletin board that we had there. And that was how it started to be known, it was just stuck up on the bulletin board, and we all thought it was good, so we didn't take it down. And everything was like that with Babaji. Everything grew so organically, and he would answer the same question differently. I mean, not hugely differently, of course, but the same question differently, because he didn't answer just the question when someone asked him. He answered that moment. He answered the person and where they were. And I felt like he answered the room, just like that moment of who was there, what we were studying, and whatever else was needed, because he was such a clear channel that whatever was needed came through him.
It's just amazing to be here, and I have to bring it round to Babaji was so connected to the source, and he wants us to connect to that source. And that's why we have this temple, and that's why we're going to have this shrine, because it doesn't matter if you knew him or not. If you were lucky enough to know him, then your faith was so restored and you didn't have doubt. Or we still had a lot of doubt, but he still kept showing us that it was going to be okay. And I think, I know I've said this before, but I want that for my children's 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 children's. And, we want that to continue. And I see that his his modeling of who he was so exemplary. You just couldn't imagine how he could be the medicine for everybody in the room. For everybody in the room. And it was, we all came with our different baggage and our samskars that would just pop up at all the different times, and he'd be there for us. And learning to try to be there for each other. And when it's bigger than we are, offering it up. You know, it's like those grinding rocks. I love that we have grinding rocks here, that the indigenous people that lived here, this was a beautiful spot that they could sit and be silent and just absorb whatever they needed to hear that voice inside that we're so connected to. And it's just an honor to be here and have been his student. I'm so grateful. And Rajendra, we used to have to play basketball, and all the women were the Miss Piggies. The kids were little, but the women were all the Miss Piggies. So we'd all get off work and we'd all get off school. We'd all show up and play basketball. But it made me laugh that we were all the Miss Piggies. Thank you.
Just in case this has been mentioned a couple of times now, these grinding rocks, and if you don't know what we're talking about, the circles around the stones on either side of the temple, we discovered after Babaji had chosen this spot, and they are the grinding rocks for the Ohlone people's acorn ceremonies, for their rituals. So this was a sacred spot, this actual spot for them. They were a nomadic people. They are nomadic people, so they didn't stay here all the time. But they used this spot for their ritual. And I forgot one thing that I wanted to say. Once Babaji wrote to me in a letter, whenever I go out the door or begin any work, I remember my teacher. I never forget to remember God. It becomes a habit, but without devotion, it's useless.
Thank you, Bhavani. So I think we can all feel, especially in hearing these stories of Babaji, what a sacred and special spot this really is. And before we talk about the shrine itself, I'm wondering, JDG, if I can invite you just to help orient us to this space. Maybe just describe the temple and this particular area. And then we can situate the shrine within this place.
Hari Om. The thing that I have come to kind of know, I would say in kind of a deep way, through Babaji's teachings, and then this expression here, manifest as the temple, is that the causal level, or samskaric level, is what drives the whole creation. Whether it's an individual, you or I, or the whole cosmos. So there's a seed of potentiality that exists. And when it is brought into a awareness, another level of awareness, and it begins to express in a subtle way, then it takes on a whole different quality that can be more palpable, can be more apparent. Now, beyond that, of course, a gross form can emerge from that. So in the case of life with Babaji, which you've heard these beautiful stories, and so many were gifted with many years' experience with them, the teaching was always coming out of him just like it radiated out of him. It was his tejas, his light, his aura, his presence, whatever we want to say. his truth, his connection to truth. It was so kind of there always. So you had this causal seed, this causal level, samskaric level of awareness that you were in that field when you were with him. Now, when we got this property, and several people referenced it, and I was grateful to be up here for one of those initial days where we got to explore the property prior to moving on. And watching him run around the property was like seeing, I want to say, a deer and a human, a mixture, like you might see or know in those kind of peyote celebrations. I don't want to reveal what anybody up here might have been doing in those days, but in any event, there was such a different quality of his whole being, his whole presence, the way he moved, the grace, the speed, the agility, as though he were just kind of moving across the surface. And what he saw, we could only imagine. He would pause and he would look, and we would look, and then he'd be gone, and we'd keep going. And he paused here on the site, and later, and he identified this would be where we would do ceremony. Later, he made it more clear. And we began every Guru Purnima, several times throughout the year. We would come together and do Vedic ritual here. And every time it began, you could feel it stirring, that subtle energy. You could feel it growing, thriving because of his presence, and then our attention just trying to be in it, be with it, and express ourselves, our love for him, our love for the teachings. He began to train all of us in different ways. Like a mother knows what to feed this child. And when this started to develop more, it became apparent that what he set here so we're very gifted. This place has now become what I think is rightly considered a tirtha. It's a place of crossing over. A tirtha is a Sanskrit word which means a place of crossing over. And it can be a place you cross over a river, and it's frequently associated with a saint or a sage. And the sage a being like Babaji is a place of crossing over. You come in that presence, and there's that subtle presence and awareness that to take you to the other side of your sorrow, your grief, whatever it might be, your joy. So that's what he has created here at Mount Madonna Center in so many ways, and probably so here at the temple, of course, but throughout the whole place by his presence, by the way he gave of his heart so incredibly, and his love, of course. So, and then we have a duty. We are custodians of this beautiful place, and a tirtha is something that goes for long, long time. And the people who tend to the tirtha will change, but the duty remains the same. The energy, the current, is like a river. It's like a river of consciousness. And people will seek it out. They'll come because they feel that transformative power. So that's what we have here from him, from Babaji. So I love what the possibility of life is, to be just spending time here and helping look after it. So and he's very much here. He's very much here. He didn't really go anywhere. So Hari Om.
Jai Gurudev. Let's all take a breath in and a breath out. And two more. Thank you all for your beautiful stories, and thank you all for your presence. I know, like, my heart feels blown open and racing at the same time. Thank you, JD, for sharing that. Really, really powerful. For me personally, I feel this duty that JD speaks of as one of the children that grew up here, who we received our own training through Babaji. And so it's the desire to give back, to share that experience with future generations. It's also a deep belief in the unmanifest or the unrealized potential of this place. That in some ways, even though it feels like a lifetime, especially to our elders and founders, because it has been, in some ways this is the first chapter that's been written. And there's many more chapters to come. And so it's an invitation to think about this sacred land imbued by energy, by Babaji's energy, in that way, to think about the future generations. So we're both simultaneously reaching to the ancient past and to the infinite future in this moment. And one of the tasks before us is to make manifest a memorial shrine to Babaji. And what an incredible opportunity, what an honor to do that. So I want to give you an update on where we are in that process. The more recent history of that process is that I think it was last year we reached out to the broader Hanuman Fellowship, our brothers and sisters at Salt Spring Center up in Canada and beyond, and we put out a survey. And we started asking questions around, what kind of experience would you like to have as you sit with Babaji and his energy? How do you envision the physical space? What quotes really speak to you that you would like to see incorporated into the design? We offered a few different styles of design, and we asked folks to choose which of those resonate with you. And we got a real outpouring of rich feedback in all of that. And we formed a shrine committee to lead that process of gathering some of that feedback to bring it into form. And we invited my brother Jai, who's one of the gifted artists and builders up here. And you can see his work, with the rock crew and many elements of this physical place, whether it's the lion temple or the lion fountain down below or this temple or so many other places. And we asked him to translate these ideas and these themes and to start to make a physical design. And so we're going to share kind of the beginning phases of that. It was the first effort to bring it into physical form. And so the Panchayat, which Babaji established, met with the Hanuman Fellowship Board of Directors to look at that design. And we had a rich discussion around it, and it really resonated with us. And so as kind of chosen representatives, we've aligned around that design. And so we want to share this early manifestation of it, knowing that it'll continue to come into form over time. There's many areas in which all of you can be involved. That will be in things like selections of the quote, when we actually break ground next year and get into the physical work. You can share your resources and your funds. We'll start fundraising, and today we received our first dedicated donation to the shrine, which is a beautiful, both material and symbolic, that this process is unfolding. So, so we'll close up the video portion today. We want to thank anyone that views this video in the future. We'll certainly share it with our friends all around the world as a substantive update on the process. And we've also begun discussions about having a standalone event that will really broadcast out to the broader satsang, where we'll continue this process. So we look forward to inviting you all to that. And so for now, goodbye and Jai Gurudev.